It began with a confession no one saw coming. After decades of silence, Elvis Costello, now 70, older, quieter, but still sharp as ever, sat down for a live interview that would change how the world remembered one of pop's most beloved faces. In just a few trembling sentences, he uncovered a truth that shattered the glossy perfection once surrounding ABBA's Agnetha Faltskog. What he revealed wasn't about fame or music. It was about pain, buried deep beneath the glitter and applause. It was 1979, London, a year when punk was clashing with pop, when rebellion met romance on the airwaves. ABBA stood at the height of their fame, their music echoing through every radio, every dance floor. Elvis Costello, meanwhile, was the angry young man of British rock, sarcastic, fearless, armed with lyrics that cut through the industry like a knife. Two worlds that were never meant to meet collided that night at a smoky record industry party. Agnetha arrived radiant yet restrained, her golden hair framing a face that seemed built for cameras but not for confrontation. Elvis, with his sharp wit and restless energy, had never been one to soften his opinions. What started as polite small talk soon turned dark. Witnesses would later recall how Elvis, half amused and half provoked, sneered at ABBA's polished image, calling them manufactured pop puppets. The room fell silent. Agnetha's expression froze, then hardened. She tried to defend her artistry, her pride trembling under the surface, but something inside her cracked. "You don't know me," she reportedly said before storming out, her heels echoing against marble floors. The tension was electric, humiliating, unforgettable. They never spoke again. But for Costello, that night would linger. Decades later, he would admit the bitterness never left him, not because of the argument, but because of what he saw in her eyes before she turned away. It wasn't vanity. It was fear. She looked terrified, he said quietly. Not of me. Of herself. That night became more than an industry anecdote. It became the first crack in the illusion surrounding Agnetha Faltskog, the woman the world thought they knew. After that night in London, Agnetha Faltskog never mentioned Elvis Costello again. But those who knew her well claimed something inside her shifted. Behind the bright television smiles and the carefully rehearsed interviews, she began to retreat, slowly, almost imperceptibly, from the outside world. ABBA continued recording and touring, but the atmosphere around the group was changing. Her marriage to Bjorn Ulvaeus had crumbled in public just months before, leaving behind 2 young children and a cloud of pain she could no longer hide. For years, she had sung songs about love and loss, but now she was living them. Performing The Winner Takes It All alongside the man who had broken her heart was torture disguised as professionalism. Fans saw poise, her friends saw collapse. Agnetha's perfectionism, once her greatest strength, began turning into her prison. She obsessed over every note in the studio, demanding endless takes until her voice cracked. Producers recalled her as brilliant but unreachable, an artist who could not stop chasing an ideal that didn't exist. Some compared working with her to walking on glass. She wanted control over everything, the lighting, the sound, even the temperature in the room. Any imperfection felt like a personal failure, but control is fragile when the soul is breaking. In 1981, she started refusing flights due to her growing fear of airplanes. What began as anxiety soon became a phobia so severe she couldn't leave Sweden without trembling. Tours were canceled, interviews rescheduled, and rehearsals missed. The tabloids branded her difficult, while insiders whispered about breakdowns, panic attacks, and tears behind closed doors. At home, she tried to find peace in motherhood, but even that came with guilt. In one rare Swedish interview, she confessed that every time she left home, her daughter would cry at the window, and she would cry on the plane. "I felt torn in two," she said softly. The world wanted a star. Her children just wanted a mother. By 1982, the balance broke completely. ABBA's final recording sessions were heavy with silence and unspoken resentment. Agnetha's once bright spirit dimmed under the weight of expectation. Her fairy tale, so full of sequins and smiles, was slowly twisting into something darker. When the band quietly dissolved that same year, the world thought she was taking a well-deserved rest. But in truth, she was already disappearing. When ABBA quietly ended in 1982, the world assumed Agnetha Faltskog needed time to rest, to heal from the chaos of fame and heartbreak. But rest never came. Instead, she slipped away, first from the spotlight, then from the people who loved her. By the mid-1980s, she was living almost entirely in seclusion on her estate outside Stockholm, surrounded by silence, pine trees, and regrets. The press followed her every move, desperate to photograph the lost blonde of a BBA. She stopped answering calls, stopped trusting neighbors. Her days became repetitive rituals, long walks in the forest, late nights at the piano, and moments of prayer for a peace that never arrived. She believed isolation might protect her. In truth, it only deepened the ache. There were attempts to rebuild her career. Producers came knocking, offering projects, duets, comebacks. She declined most of them. Those who did manage to work with her described a woman torn between the desire to sing and the fear of exposure. Every camera flash felt like an attack. Every interview question a threat. "I wanted to make music," she once admitted years later, "but I couldn't bear the world that came with it." Then came betrayal, the kind that cuts deeper than any headline. During this fragile period, Agnetha began a relationship with Torbjörn Brander, a police detective who had once helped her through a stalker incident. To her, he seemed kind, reliable, safe. For a time, she believed she could trust again. But soon after their relationship ended, the tabloids exploded with intimate stories, private details that only he could have known. Photos, bedroom rumors, fragments of letters, sold to the press for profit. It was a humiliation that broke what little faith she had left in people. "He sold me," she reportedly told a friend. "Not for revenge. For money." From that moment, Agnetha withdrew completely. She stopped attending events, refused public appearances, and lived like a ghost in her own home. The once golden girl of Sweden became a myth, talked about, searched for, but rarely seen. Through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, she was no longer a singer or a star. She was a symbol of something else, of how fame, once intoxicating, can become a slow form of disappearance. The world had celebrated her voice, but Agnetha was now trapped in silence, the same silence she had spent her whole life trying to escape. The years that followed tested Agnetha Faltskog in ways no one could imagine. By the early 1990s, her solitude had turned into survival. What began as a choice to live quietly soon became a necessity. The press had not forgotten her, and neither had the people who confused admiration with possession. Among them was one man who would change her life forever, Gert van der Graaf, a Dutch fan whose obsession grew into something dark and terrifying. At first, he was harmless, a familiar face at concerts, someone who sent letters filled with admiration. But over time, those letters became frequent, desperate, unsettling. He moved to Sweden to be near her. He found her house, her routines, her silence. Agnetha called the police, frightened but unsure what else to do. Restraining orders were issued, but he kept returning. He watched her from the road, from behind trees, from windows. The golden voice that once filled stadiums now belonged to a woman who slept with lights on and checked every lock twice before bed. Neighbors recalled hearing her pacing late into the night. Friends said she rarely smiled anymore. Her home, once a sanctuary, had turned into a prison wrapped in snow and silence. She became afraid of opening her curtains, afraid of being seen, afraid of being remembered. What the world viewed as mystery was, in truth, terror. When the stalker was finally arrested and deported, the damage had already been done. Agnetha's trust in humanity, already fragile, was shattered beyond repair. Her mind had built invisible walls, her spirit too tired to rebuild. Yet somehow music still called to her, faintly, like a memory she couldn't abandon. In 2004, after years of silence, she attempted a comeback with My Coloring Book, a nostalgic album that revisited songs from her youth. It was meant to be healing, a soft return to the only world she had ever truly known. The press went wild. The label invested millions. Fans held their breath, waiting to see the woman behind the myth. But as the cameras returned, so did the panic. After a few brief appearances, she vanished again. The tour was canceled without explanation. Some insiders claimed she had collapsed backstage in tears. Others said she locked herself in a hotel room and refused to come out. For the world, it was confusion. For Agnetha, it was the breaking point. She had tried to return to the light, but the shadows followed her everywhere. Fame had become a ghost that would not let her rest, a ghost that haunted every song, every silence, every sleepless night. After the collapse of her comeback in 2004, Agnetha Faltskog disappeared once more, this time for good. The woman whose voice had once carried across continents retreated into near total silence. Her estate outside Stockholm became a fortress of solitude, surrounded by trees, gates, and unanswered letters. Those who had once worked with her no longer tried to reach out. Even family visits became rare and brief. The press occasionally caught a glimpse, a blurred photograph at a grocery store, a distant figure walking her dog. Each sighting sparked speculation, but never clarity. Fans filled the void with stories, that she was writing new music, that she was ill, that she simply wanted peace. But no one really knew. Agnetha herself offered no explanations. Her interviews ceased. Her voice was gone, not from illness, but from exhaustion, emotional, spiritual, human. Inside that silence, she lived in a fragile routine. Days began and ended the same. Books, the piano, long moments by the window watching the seasons pass. Friends said she rarely spoke of the past, yet traces of it were everywhere. Gold records on the wall, photographs from a life that no longer felt like hers. To most of the world, she had become a ghost. But to those who understood her, she was a survivor. Someone who had endured what fame quietly destroys, the ability to be ordinary. Still, even silence can't last forever. Time moves on. Decades passed. By the early 2020s, ABBA's music had been reborn through digital nostalgia and reunion projects. But Agnetha remained distant, almost symbolic. The untouchable, fragile heart of a story that once glittered. People wondered why she stayed hidden. Some said she feared the world. Others said she feared herself. And then, in 2025, the world remembered her again, not through a song, but through a confession. Elvis Costello, now 70, appeared in a televised interview that began as a reflection on his career and ended as something else entirely. He spoke quietly at first, recalling that night in 1979 when he had mocked her. But as he went on, the tone changed. His voice trembled. "She wasn't vain," he said. "She was terrified." She carried something heavy that none of us could see. Those words spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, fans debated, journalists dug through archives. For the first time in decades, people stopped talking about Agnetha the icon and began to see Agnetha the woman. Behind the flawless smile, behind the melodies that defined a generation, there had been a battle no stage could hide. And now, through Costello's confession, the silence was finally breaking. On the island of Ecaro, the wind drifts through the birch trees, carrying the chill of Lake Malaran. Inside a yellow-painted house, Agnetha often sits by the window, a wool blanket over her shoulders, listening to old recordings. Sometimes the voice she hears startles her, bright, full of life, and she realizes it's her own, from a time when she still believed the world would never hurt her. There are no more flights, no more stages, no applause, only the sound of wind and the slow passing of hours. She rarely leaves home now, except for short walks in the garden, wearing the old knitted cap and gloves her daughter gave her. Neighbors sometimes see her, small, quiet, as if she's talking to memories only she can hear. The past hasn't left her. It lives within the walls, in the crooked ABBA photo from 1977, the letter from Bjorn after their divorce, the vinyl record Costello once sent decades later, signed without a message. She doesn't feel anger anymore, only a faint sadness, soft and familiar, like morning fog over the lake. When the news broke in spring 2025, Elvis Costello's public confession, she said nothing. She turned off the TV and opened the window. She didn't want to hear it again, but she couldn't deny that something inside her had finally settled. Even the most delayed apology can loosen the weight of years. That afternoon, she sat at the piano. Her hands trembled as they touched the ivory keys. She could no longer sing, but her lips moved in silence. "Thank you for the music." No one heard it but the gray sky and the still water outside. Yet perhaps, somewhere far away, that sound reached back through time. To the young woman she once was, the one who still believed that music could save every soul, even her own. The journalist arrived on a gray morning, when the air smelled of wet leaves and rain. He was in his early 30s, too young to have lived through ABBA's golden years, yet somehow deeply affected by their music. He carried a small recorder, a notebook, and the fragile hope that Agnetha would agree to speak. At first, she didn't answer the door. He waited in silence, listening to the soft creak of branches. When the door finally opened, she stood there, older, thinner, her hair almost silver. Her eyes, though tired, held a gentleness that disarmed him. "I don't give interviews anymore," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "I'm not here for gossip. I just wanted to say that his words, what he said about you, changed how people see everything. Maybe how he saw himself, too." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she motioned for him to come in. The house smelled of coffee and old vinyl. On the wall, framed photos told a life in fragments. A young girl with a microphone, a mother holding her children, a woman smiling on stage beneath blinding lights. They sat in silence for a long time. Then, with a sigh, she said, "People think fame breaks you. It doesn't. It freezes you in the moment of your brightest light. And when the world moves on, you're left there, shining for no one." The journalist didn't interrupt. He simply listened. "I used to think forgiveness was about others," she continued. "But it's really about finding peace with the parts of yourself you had to abandon to survive." She paused, then smiled faintly. "I hope he found his peace, too." Before he left, she handed him a record, her 1983 solo album, "Wrap Your Arms Around Me." "Play it on a rainy day," she said. "That's when it sounds honest." As he walked back down the gravel path, the wind carried faint music from the house, a melody almost lost in time. And for a brief, trembling moment, it felt as if the past itself was exhaling, letting go. Sometimes, time doesn't heal. It simply teaches us how to live with what remains. Agnetha and Elvis Costello, two souls marked by music and misunderstanding, carried their pain across decades until silence finally spoke louder than words. But what do you think? Can an apology, even after 40 years, truly bring peace to a wounded heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe for more untold truths behind the legends we thought we knew.